Well, it's super memorable because my mission president, he had us fly out earlier so that we could be there for President Ballard, President Eyring, and President Christopherson. All of them were speaking to our whole mission. So we went out there earlier. Um, but I do remember just that excitement of wanting to talk to everybody. The bus driver, the lady that was driving us to the temple, I was just like super excited to talk to her in Spanish. Um, but I do remember our mission president when we got there, getting to the temple. He just gathered us around. It was about 10 o'clock at night, so it was super late, but the lights were still showing on the temple, and he just told us that was our goal, that's what we wanted our investigators to have is an eternal family. So that was a very memorable experience to right after getting off the plane, going to the temple and seeing that. I know that right now there's a tradition in the mission. Your trainer, he buys you it's called a treat, Tritz. It's like this ice cream sandwich. So that was just a tradition that we had the first day in the mission. Your trainer would buy you that. So I did that to the people I trained. So when I served, it was one country, just Costa Rica. But as of July 2015, they're going to divide the mission into the East and the West. So the Costa Rica San Jose East mission and the Costa Rica San Jose West mission. As far as I know, I'm pretty sure San Jose is going to be kind of the dividing line. But I don't know the details. But when I was there, I did see a lot of growth as far as stakes go. I was there when one of the stakes split, the Alajuela stake to the Heredia and Alajuela stake. So I think now there are probably 9 stakes. So most of the stakes have at least a couple branches. But especially on the east and in Liberia and in the south, there's still quite a few branches. But I think all those districts have been made part of stakes now. As far as like the religion, obviously Catholicism has a huge influence, but I feel like within the past 20-30 years there's been like a growth in more of evangelical churches, so there's a lot more of that influence. There's a lot of Jehovah's Witnesses. I met quite a few people that were Jewish, so I feel like there's kind of become more of a blend of religions, and a lot of people have already heard about the church, and I feel like there's not really a part of the country besides maybe in the southern part where there's lots of rainforests, but I feel like everybody knows or has heard or seen the missionaries. So the church has definitely grown a lot in Costa Rica. It totally depends, but a lot of the wards that I went to, there was one ward that I went to that had over 200 people on a weekly basis, but then another ward I went to, there were only 60. And then I was in branches. Actually, in my last area, the branch, about a month after I left, it became a ward. But when I was there, it started out with about a attendance of 70, but by the time I left, it was about 120. So some of those branches even have higher attendance than some of the wards. I know that the temple, it was built in 2000 when Gordon B. Hinckley was a prophet. So it's like the same design as some of the other temples. Like I left for my mission from Oklahoma, and the Oklahoma City temple is exactly the same, just flipped. So it's kind of the same design as a lot of the other smaller temples. He's a lawyer, the husband, from Meet the Mormons, and he actually married a couple that we baptized in my first area. So, yeah, it's interesting in the mission in Costa Rica, and I'm sure in lots of other countries. So to get baptized, obviously, you have to get married. So they usually pay about $100 to $150. And a lot of people in Costa Rica are not married, just because they see that as pretty expensive. So I still remember I like helped a lot of couples fundraise by selling cookies and stuff. But yeah, Brother Munoz, he's a really good man. He didn't charge us very much. Definitely gave us a discounted rate. So I esteem him highly for that. But yeah, I was really excited to see Meet the Mormons, and took me back to my mission. As far as holidays go, they do not celebrate Mexican holidays like Cinco de Mayo, which honestly Mexicans don't even really celebrate. They do celebrate Easter, which is called La Semana Santa, the Holy Week. It's a much bigger celebration. 40 days before they have Ash Wednesday and Lent. And I saw a lot of crosses in front of the house in the lawn, and they drape like a sheet of cloth. And based on the time, they'd change the color of it. So during Lent, it's purple, and during Holy Week, it's, I think, red, and then on the Resurrection Day, it's white. So I did see that a lot of the holidays are related to the Catholic faith. So especially during those times, I noticed that a lot of people were a lot less prone to let us teach them. During Christmas time, I ate a lot of tamales. That's just their friendly way of welcoming you to their home. They'd usually invite you in, give you tamales. If you were too full, they'd send you home with tamales, 3 or 4. But the Christmas time is a lot more family-centered and less about the gifts there. Honestly, I mean, I wasn't there to witness, I guess, Christmas morning with any families, but I don't think that they really gave many gifts, maybe just a couple. The night on Christmas Eve, there's lots of fireworks, so that was a little different. Most people stay up really late on Christmas Eve, and that's kind of a bigger deal there. Mother's Day is on August 15th. Independence Day is on September 15th. They do not celebrate Halloween. I heard, I'm not sure if it's true, but apparently some kids got poisoned by the candy. So now it's more of an adult holiday, and it's not exactly moral. what the people do that do celebrate Halloween, they usually just wear immoral costumes. And Valentine's Day, they celebrate that. But I think those are all the holidays that they celebrate. A good way to either get into a home or to be rejected from a home is to identify with a certain team. So it's a good idea to figure out what the family that you're approaching, what team they associate with, before you say what team you're associated with. So there are 3 main teams. There's La Liga, Saprissa. Those are probably the 2 main ones, and then there's Heredia. There's lots of other soccer teams, but those are probably the biggest 3. So Saprissa is based in Tibas, and that's where I first started my mission. So I was a sapricista. But I also served in Alajuela, where La Liga is based. So I kind of had to make sure that I wasn't offending anybody by saying I was sapricista. And then I also served in Heredia, so I kind of got to see all 3. There's a lot of tension and competition when that game comes around between those teams. So a lot of countries kind of have their nickname, like Honduras, they're called Catrachos. Costa Ricans, they're called Ticos, just because they sometimes add ICO, to the ends of words instead of ito, like chiquitico, for like something that's little. Honestly, I was surprised that I didn't hear it as much. But that's just kind of the nickname that they've been given. And I feel like they use that almost more than saying that they're Costarricenses. probably just because that word's a lot longer. But I mean, it's not offensive at all to call Costa Rican a tico. So I was impressed just how they kind of have like an open door policy. Like a lot of people, they just keep their doors open, and really, it was interesting the way that you kind of, when you go up to a house, you like take a coin and you'll sometimes tap on the fence. I guess that's the more formal way. As missionaries, what we did, we'd tap on the fence and we say "upe," and then if they're there or if they want to talk to us, then they'll come out. But they are just, I was impressed how friendly they are. Even if they don't have an interest in the church, or if they're very firm in their religion, they would almost always just greet us. And a lot of them have a lot of interest in the United States, so a lot of them would ask us about that. But it was a lot easier than I'd imagined to like just carry on an everyday conversation with people there. So yeah, very friendly. And sometimes they'd even just offer you a drink or water, sometimes even food, even if they had no interest in the church. But they are a very God-fearing people, I think. Just in everyday conversation, they bring up God. There's lots of phrases that you learn on the mission. Sometimes they're frustrating because, like, si Dios lo permite, if God allows me to, like, some people would kind of use that as an excuse if they don't go to church. So they kind of add on these phrases. But a lot of people just at the end of sentences will be like, gracias a Dios, like, thanks to God, like, and they just really recognize God in their lives and like the blessings that they have. So I feel like I realized that in their culture, like, religion and I guess family and everyday life are not separate. They're very much combined. The family is a huge part of Costa Rican culture. And I just have very fond memories of like the families that I met there. And around holiday times, you'll just always see them together. And usually, like, if the grandparents are getting older, the kids will live with them. And if not, if they didn't even, a lot of them don't even separate from their parents. They just live with their parents even when they get married. So a lot of households there are huge. With over 10, 15 people living in the same house. But I loved getting to know all the family members, and you can definitely see how important it is. And that's usually what we'd focus our lessons on, especially in the beginning, focusing on the eternal nature of the family. And I found a lot of success when you kind of tap into that knowledge that they already have. A lot of them already feel that like the family's eternal, that there's more after this life. But Costa Rica does not have an army or navy or any of that. So instead of I guess using all that money for an army, they spend it a lot more on education and on healthcare. So a lot of people stay pretty healthy. I've heard that in Nicoya, it's like the peninsula on the western side. They're famous for having people that live over 100 years. I think it's one of the top 5 places in the world for people that live over 100. So they're pretty healthy people. There is a big influence from Nicaragua. There's a lot of people that come to Costa Rica looking for employment. And I mean, it's kind of a stereotype, but a lot of them have the jobs that are in more of like the farms and in construction. But they also have a very distinct accent, so usually you could tell pretty quickly if somebody's from Nicaragua by the way they speak. Also, a lot of them have gold teeth, whereas Costa Ricans, they have a lot of good dentists, so you can usually tell just from looking at someone whether they're from Nicaragua or Costa Rica. But I grew to love a lot of people from Nicaragua. I'd say probably a third of the people that I taught were actually Nicaraguans. So, and a lot of people that get baptized are from Nicaragua. And I know that as a country, the Ticos, people from Costa Rica, often get angry at Nicaraguans because they feel like they're taking their jobs, but I didn't see as much of that tension, I guess, among members of the church. Obviously, there were some exceptions, but usually they were pretty unified in the church as far as Nicaraguans and Costa Ricans go. So Costa Rica definitely is well known for its exports of like fruits, bananas, pineapple. So I know that a long time ago there was like the United Fruit Company, which had a huge influence on Central America, which was an American company. So I'm pretty sure they started to build a railroad through Costa Rica, and a lot of the people that came to work on that were immigrants from Haiti. A lot came from China, I think, and maybe Japan. I met a lot of people on my mission that were, I know a man that's Chinese. He's one of my good friends still. He's actually Catholic, Chinese Catholic. But yeah, there's just a lot of foreigners. And you do see a mix kind of with the races. There's a lot of European influence. Like when I look at a Costa Rican, they don't look, I guess, what I had envisioned as like a Latino would look like, because I picture them kind of with darker skin. But so there's a lot of European influence. I know there are a lot of like with Christopher Columbus. I think after that there were a lot of settlers that came to Costa Rica. And from there were like lots of battles with like Nicaragua. In fact, one of the heroes of that battle is named Juan Santa Maria, and after him they named the airport. So he's well known in Alajuela. There's lots of statues to him. So I feel like Tibas is a pretty typical city, I guess, but not typical of like the campo, the kind of the rural parts. But all the houses are right up next to each other. I was very shocked by that. So I could like hear what's going on in the house next to me a lot. Also, there are not any dryers. People always, when they do their laundry, they just let it dry outside, which I still am not sure how they dry their clothes during the rainy season. But they do it. Also, you always wash your dishes because they don't have dishwashers there either. Most people have fridges, and rarely do people bake. They have a stovetop, but some people that even have a stove with an oven, they don't even use the oven. So Tibas, like any other city, like the center is the Catholic Church, and then there's a park, and then around that there's lots of little shops. Lots of people have like shoe repair stores, just kind of like more of those sorts of jobs. Lots of little tiny stores for like school supplies. And then you kind of trickle out, like the houses are like really close to the center. And people always get around using the bus. Honestly, there's not a ton of people that have cars. Usually people that do have cars have a lot more money. But bus fares are pretty cheap, about like 50 cents. So that's how a lot of people got to and from everywhere, like from San Jose to Tibas and Tibas to lots of other major cities. But yeah, I got used to giving up my seat because the buses were usually pretty crowded, and lots of like pregnant women. Even Ticos would give up their seat, like if they see a woman. So there's a lot of etiquette on the bus. There's like a little string that you pull whenever you're about to stop, so the bus driver knows where to let you off. But yeah, I just got really used to the bus atmosphere. There's a lot of people that try to sell you stuff on the bus. They'll get in front and kind of give you their pitch and then go seat by seat. Some people also ask for money that way, some beggars. But honestly, a lot of missionaries, we use that as a way to share the gospel. We'd get up on the bus and share a message and pass out pamphlets. So we kind of use it as a effective strategy. Some of the buses that go to the further areas, like Limon and Liberia, there's even like 2-decker buses, and the ride's like a couple hours. So you have a lot of time. Sometimes they even have movies going. But buses were a good opportunity to meet new people, because usually you try to find an empty seat and next to somebody, and you talk to them the whole ride. So there's definitely lots of effective, I guess, finding techniques just through transportation, because you don't have a car. We also couldn't ride bikes, so we'd either always walk everywhere or ride the bus. Typical schedule, I guess, we'd have our morning studies, and then we'd go and eat in Tibos. We had it scheduled so that we'd eat at a different member's house every day. But in a lot of my other areas, we paid somebody about 60 mil, which is about $120 a month, for them to give us lunch every day. So we'd have lunch provided for us with that, but then for dinner we'd have to, either if investigators or members wanted to feed us, then we could go. But honestly, lunch there is the big meal. So right after studies, we'd have lunch, and then we'd start our day. So at the beginning of my mission with my mission president, we were transitioning from the old mission president, so we were still tracting a lot. So I remember knocking on lots of doors. But with my new mission president, we started emphasizing that we shouldn't ever be knocking on doors for like more than an hour. Like if an appointment fell through, we could knock doors, but usually we always had appointments. I don't remember being in the street a ton. Usually the members would either give us lots of referrals, or we'd find lots of people on the street. Usually we'd find people just in the street. We didn't even have to knock the door, but a lot of people were out walking, so we'd find them that way. But as far as maybe safety, there were definitely areas, especially in Tibos, that were a little scarier. I mean, it's not common for missionaries to get robbed, but I did just once. There was a drunk man that punched me and told me to give him the money that I had, but nothing too serious. I was very calm through it all. So I honestly didn't feel threatened too much. So the dry season is from like November to April, and then the wet season is from about April to October. October is the worst month. And I got to the country in September, so right when the rainy season was ending, but when it's at its worst. So I still remember just days where I would just be soaking wet and I just have to trudge along. So it gets really hot in I guess our winter here. So February, that's when it's usually the worst, sweating a ton. But I guess temperature wise, it doesn't get too extreme. It's just the humidity is pretty bad. But I noticed that there were like huge differences just based on where you are in the country. I never served in the northwestern part, but I know that that's probably the hottest part, Liberia. But if you're in the valley, like that's where it rains the most, and it's a lot colder. Um, and in Limon on the east coast, also it rains a lot, but it's also a lot more humid. Um, but temperature-wise, I don't even think it got over 100 many days, and never below like 40 or 50. So usually constant temperature of like 70. I saw lots of sloths in my last area on the East Coast. Definitely in the cities I didn't see a lot, but even in the cities, like you were pretty close to like mountains and national parks, so we'd go there and see lots of butterflies, lots of exotic flowers. Um, there are a lot of bugs, mosquitoes and spiders. I didn't see any poisonous snakes. When I went before my mission, I did, however. When I was in the rainforest, I saw poison dart frogs, and I did see poisonous snakes, scorpions. But also there's lots of birds. Even in the city, I saw lorikeets, or loras, just flying above. It's kind of interesting. You'd see both the exotic birds and then pigeons together. So there are toucans that you can see. But yeah, I was excited to see a sloth for the first time. That was fun. In my last apartment, we had bats in our ceiling. So kind of got a little scared for a moment because they might have rabies. The dogs, there are lots of dogs just in the streets. So honestly, that was usually the most dangerous part, especially when they're in herds, I guess, because sometimes they try to attack you all at the same time. But usually, umbrellas made a very useful weapon, not just to cover yourself from the rain. So luckily, I didn't ever get bitten by a dog, but definitely was threatened by them. So the currency in Costa Rica is the colon. So they have like kind of smaller coins. They're like 500 colones, and that's about how much you pay for a really long bus ride. But usually the smaller bus rides, like to the city, are like 250 colones, which is about 50 cents. So 1,000 colones, which is one. It's a rojo. They just call it the rojo because it's red. That's $2. So for rent, in most of my areas, we paid around 50,000 colones, me and my companion. So that's $100 each. But so honestly, that's pretty cheap for an apartment for a whole month. And so we'd also pay somebody usually to do our laundry. So we pay them about $20 a month for that. And then if you did have a cook, we usually paid them about $120 to cook us lunch every month. So the main thing that was the most expensive was the food. But yeah, so the mission works right now, like you just get a budget. So each area has a specific budget because, for example, in Liberia and Limon, like you have to pay a lot more to travel, to go to district meetings and to go to further out areas to visit investigators. So they have like a higher budget for transportation. So it varies based on the area, but usually the rates are about the same in every area. It's definitely more expensive in Costa Rica than any other Central American country. So people there definitely make a lot less money per hour. I mean, I think I asked like a guy that worked on a farm, and I think he made maybe $40 a day, if that. But I think that's even a lot for a lot of people that work there. But yeah, a lot of people just have like their own business, Yeah, like if they know how to repair shoes, if they know how to sew. So a lot of people just kind of find their own jobs. I know there are a lot of big, huge companies like Intel and HP that are down in Costa Rica. I think it's even called the Silicon Republic because it's got a lot of those companies down there. So a lot of people also work for like call centers. So English is a really valuable tool for people down there. So I taught lots of English classes, and people were always pretty interested. So that was also a useful finding method, because people definitely have an interest for English. And even the schools, they teach English very early on. I remember I helped out with a spelling bee for elementary school kids that had to spell out really long words. And I was amazed how these second and third graders could spell out Wednesday in English using English letters. So I was very impressed how much English people did know and how much they can use it to find a better career and job. So first off, typical breakfast is gallo pinto, which is a mix of, usually they'd use their day-old rice or beans that they cooked the day before, and just mix it all together for breakfast. Add a red pepper, and they love cilantro, which there's called culantro. So they'd mix all of that up with some oil and fry it, and serve it with it's kind of like sour cream. It's called natilla. Serve it with that, usually with a fried egg, sometimes some sort of meat. Like I noticed they ate a lot of like hot dogs, but they'd like cook them on the stove. And then they love, for breakfast, sometimes they have like just baguettes with just bread and jam. So they'd have that. That's kind of your typical meal. They have a lot of fresh fruit drinks, frescos, tons of exotic fruits. Like, I'm pretty sure they don't have this anywhere else in the world. It's called cas, just like a little green fruit. Not sure how to describe it, but it's amazing. It's probably one of my favorites. I did love the papaya batidos, which are, I think, milkshakes. And then for lunch, they'd always have a casado, married. That just means just a plate with rice and beans, usually with fried plantains, and then some sort of meat. That was just their typical lunch, I guess, that you could buy at any soda, which is what they called like the, I guess, corner stores or like wherever you could buy food off the street. And one of my favorite meals in my last area on Limon, on that side, which has more of a Caribbean influence, there's a lot of people from Haiti, I think. And they have this dish, it's called rice and beans. But of course with Costa Rican accent, they like lose the S on the end, because it's like rice and bean. So that's a mix of rice and beans, but it has coconut milk, and they usually flavor it with some like, if they like cook chicken, they like use the broth, mix it in with that. So that was really good. The branch president in my last area in Guasimo, he was famous for his rice and beans. So it's a lot of people take pride in their recipes for gallo pinto and rice and beans. I guess a typical dessert was tres leches, which is just cake with lots of different milks. I guess they use like sweetened condensed milk, but it's really good, and usually drizzled with caramel on the top. But on the topic of food, there is a lot of like fried chicken. There's a lot of fast food restaurants. I was amazed how almost every P-Day we'd like go to McDonald's or Taco Bell or Wendy's. So in a lot of the major cities, there's tons of common fast food chains from America. So um, there's also restaurants like Applebee's and Chili's. So there is a huge American influence there. And even the stores, there's a store like Costco. It's just called Price Smart. And I'd go there all the time. So honestly, I never got too homesick for like American food, I guess, because I could just make it myself. Um, they have a store out of Mercado, which has lots of stuff from other countries, even from like Japan and um, Europe. So like you can basically buy anything there. The food is a lot more expensive there, though. I was surprised. I'd say it's even a little more expensive than what we pay here. Um, the milk comes in little cartons, just like a rectangular box. Um, that was interesting. So the Costa Rican accent, I feel like, it's not as typical as like other countries. It's like it's just a very generic Spanish, but they do not roll their R's. That's kind of a big difference. Like even the country, I started out my mission saying Costa Rica, and they're like, no, it's Costa Rica, and like words like carro, like they just like don't roll them, and there's a lot of slang words. Like dude is my, say awesome, twenties. They also throw in pura vida anywhere they can. It's kind of like a question and an answer. They're like, how are you? Pura vida. That's like their response, and literally means pure life. So I think it's a good expression of kind of the Costa Rican culture because they're just very laid back and kind of go with the flow. So if you want to just get on somebody's good side, just say pura vida. And they say lots of other kind of random words that are not typical in other countries, like hoopah is head. But yeah, there's just lots of little words here and there that other people don't understand. I noticed that a lot of my companions, even, they'd have to ask what what people meant by certain words. I learned very quickly that in Costa Rica you do not use to, especially as a missionary. You definitely use usted with everybody, but even among like couples, parents and kids, I even noticed that they often use usted, which is a very formal way of saying you. They do use vos sometimes, like among husband and wife. Sometimes they use vos, which is kind of hard to get the hang of, conjugating verbs in vos. So yeah, definitely do not use vos or to as a missionary with anyone. Mondongo, which is cow intestines. But yeah, we were going to kind of in this darker alleyway, and I told my companion that we were going to go there, but after I said that, I like felt the spirit tell me not to go there, but I was like, I'm still going to go. Which honestly, well, like I honestly didn't recognize it. It was like a prompting until after the fact, but it definitely was. So I go into this alleyway, there's this like suspicious drunk man just sitting on the curb, and so like we go into this alleyway, and then he cornered us. And he only went after me. I had a short Honduran companion, but he just told us, he's like, "Give me your cell phones." And we didn't have cell phones until actually a year after I started my mission. So we were like, "Sorry, we don't have anything for you." And he's like, "Give me your cell phones." And so he punched me in the face. And so I took out my wallet. I'm like, "Okay, here I have $2." And he like took my whole wallet and he searched through it, and I forgot that I had also stored some more money there, so he took that, threw it down along with my name tag. He pulled out my name tag and threw that back at me, and he just ran off. I I loved seeing members be missionaries. In my last area, in fact, the day before I left, I saw the baptism of a mom and her daughter, and the son was able to baptize them, and he'd been baptized a couple weeks before. But that was a really, really special experience for me because I saw the fruits of like the members, and honestly that gave me more joy than even when I found a family, because it's a sign of conversion when like members themselves can help in the missionary work and help them and provide like lasting conversion, because I definitely saw my mission lots of people that fell away because they didn't have that support system. And so seeing like neighbors and family and friends share the gospel with others, that was just very spiritual experiences for me. Yes. In my first area, when I was introducing myself, I said that soy violador, because I play the viola. So usually you add like DOR on the end of some verbs to like make it like a person that does that. So unfortunately, violador means a rapist. So luckily everybody there just laughed, and I explained that I'm not a rapist, but I play the viola. So it's kind of an embarrassing mistake I made with the language. It just rained a lot in October, and I still remember the water came up to my knees in one part, and I just looked down and I'm like, okay, we're just trudging through, and the day went on, but I was soaked up to my knees. On another occasion, in fact, it was raining so hard and we were walking so far that I took off my shoes, my socks, and rolled up my pants. My companion did the same thing. And then this truck pulls up. He's like, "Do you guys need a ride?" And so we like sat in the trunk. Afterwards, I realized that we probably shouldn't have done that, but we were glad that he helped us out. But it was raining so hard that like everything was so soaked. I just rolled up my pants and started walking barefoot. So what I would recommend for any of you that know that you're gonna serve in Costa Rica, the main thing would be to develop a love for the people as soon as you can. For me, it was hard at the beginning to overcome that fear, especially with learning the language, just that fear of, I guess, failure, or just that discomfort with like just going up to a random stranger and talking about God. But I just wish that I had overcome that fear sooner and just rely on the Spirit. Because if you love those people, you'll want them to hear about the gospel. And it's so easy. You really see it in their faces and in their lives that they need the gospel to have eternal families, to have a productive life, to give it meaning, to understand that God loves them during their trials, and to feel clean from their sins. So I would say to definitely gain a testimony of those principles now, and be able to testify and share personal experiences about the restoration, about the Book of Mormon. And the Book of Mormon really is the key in missionary work, for people to truly progress, as well as prayer. It was amazing to see after people finally opened up the Book of Mormon or truly prayed, to know if the church was true, how much that changed them. So definitely begin your mission with a firm testimony of the Book of Mormon.
I remember when I first, see, when we flew into Costa Rica, I left, it was late we left the MTC, drove to Salt Lake. It had to be somewhere around 6 or 7 in the afternoon, and flew to LA. And then in LA, I think it was something like 11 o'clock at night or something is when our next flight went to Guatemala City. Got to Guatemala City. I can't remember when it was, but when we left LA, but we got there, I remember sometime around 5 in the morning. It was still dark. And so we got to see the sunrise. There were about 8 or 10 of us that went down at the same time to Costa Rica. And we got to watch the sunrise from the airplane somewhere above Central America. So that's the biggest thing I remember from the start, was watching the sunrise and the clouds. You see little mountain peaks popping up, and pretty idyllic. It was kind of cool. But flew down there to Costa Rica, and I remember the first thing I thought of was, wow, it's humid. It shocked me. And I'm from Texas, where it's not, it's not very dry. It's East Texas is pretty humid, but it shocked me from living in Provo for 2 months learning Spanish and getting down there. Lots of busy work you have to do that first day. Lots of stuff to get your visa, to do immigration requirements and training and stuff. So it was much more being shuttled around and getting pictures and fingerprints and stuff than I thought we would have. And I don't know if it's different in other places, but in Costa Rica, it all had to be done within like 24 hours. So we were rushing around like chickens with our heads cut off, getting everything done. But that first week, it was wonderful, and also very shocking at the same time. I realized I really didn't have any way of communicating with the people. I thought I had learned Spanish, but no, you get there and it was something else. The people, they don't speak fast Spanish in Costa Rica, but I still couldn't understand them. And we had a slew of discussions set up the first day when I arrived, and that was back when we had discussions, and so all I could do, I couldn't remember them, so I went ahead and had the book in front of me and I read, but I couldn't understand their responses or anything. But it was one of those things where it's almost a testimony building experience. I didn't know really what they were saying, and I was just praying that I could understand what I was saying, but I could still feel the Spirit. So that was a wonderful help to me then, to keep discouragement and doubt at bay, that I knew something was working and they could understand. If it was only just my companion, they were still feeling the Spirit, and at least my objective was being worked on then. But it was a wonderful experience. One thing that really helped me, knowing Costa Rica, Central America, was understanding that a lot of the people there were most likely literal descendants of Nephi and Lehi and those great people in the Book of Mormon, that those were their ancestors in the past. And being able to share with them a story of their ancestors, let them know that Jesus Christ had visited the Americas, to where their families, their great how many great grandfathers and grandmothers and great aunts and uncles had been here and had been loved enough by our Savior to be visited by Him, was something that not only I felt that I could connect a lot with, but that I felt really connected with the people there. The Costa Rica changed my life completely, in a wonderful way. The mission isn't easy. It was, and I know this is cliche, but it was probably the hardest 2 years of my entire life, but the best 2 years of my entire life, especially there in Costa Rica. The people you meet, the things you will see, everything from lives changing to beautiful waterfalls, will change and shape your life and have you see things through a different lens and see the wonderful people and creations that God has made, that He absolutely loves and wants to come unto Him. It was one of the best times of my entire life. Back in the, I could be totally butchering the dates. I think it was somewhere in the 40s, maybe the 60s. And this is Costa Rican history by Anthony. There was some type of either a coup, or they were afraid of a coup, a military coup. But what I know they did was that they abolished the military. So Costa Rica, and this might be more into politics than history, but Costa Rica does not have a standing military. They don't have an army, an air force, a navy. The only thing they do have is a Coast Guard. I mean, they've got miles and miles of coastline, both Caribbean and Pacific. Um, so they're really, in a sense, they're kind of like a lame duck sitting out there. I mean, it's a beautiful country. It has one of the richest biodiversities in the world. Such a small country for everything they have. They have excellent economy. Well, relatively excellent economy for Costa Rica or for Central America. An excellent educational system, but they have no military, and that's a lot of times is the point of pride with the Costa Ricans. Their Air Force are the toucans. Their Navy are the tortoises or something like that. But I know that happens sometimes in the 40s to 60s range for that part of history. They claim I served one time for a stretch of time on the Caribbean coast in a city called Puerto Limon, Lemon Port, and lemon, lime, something like that. There's an island off the port, off the main city, that they claim Christopher Columbus came to and stayed for a time when he was making his rounds in the area and discovered America and stuff like that. And it could be true. I have no idea the places that Christopher Columbus visited, but that's one of their claim to fame in that area, is that Christopher Columbus stayed there. And I think they call that island either Cristobal Colon, which is Christopher Columbus, or just Colon or something like that is what they named the island in honor of him. In the past, I know there were very large indigenous populations in Costa Rica. They are much fewer now. When I lived in that same area on the Pacific coast, we would see a lot of people that were definitely not standard Costa Ricans. I am not a lot, but I am darker than most Costa Ricans. They're very fair-skinned. I believe there's lots of Spanish blood there, but relatively fair-skinned. And the indigenous population, however, is very dark. And there were still some in the outskirts of the populated areas that I would see sometimes at banks, sometimes at markets. And I know that there used to be really large indigenous populations there. I don't know exactly what happened to them, if they were pushed out or if there were reservations there. I have really no idea. I think that about sums it up for what I know of history. Oh, northwest Costa Rica used to be a part of Nicaragua, which is just north. And there was some kind of annexation or something like that happened in this last century where they went ahead and Costa Rica was given or somehow took a large chunk, which is now northwest Costa Rica, called Guanacaste. Or the Costa Rican people they look much different, and their Spanish is much different because they used to be part of a different country. And sometime, I believe in the past centuries, when Costa Rica did expand and get that bigger part of Nicaragua. And I think that about sums up my knowledge of the history there. Soccer. Soccer is a tradition that is just massive in Costa Rica. They have actually two major teams that play throughout the country. One is called Alajuela. That's one of the major cities in the main valley. And probably like half the country go with the Alajuela team, and the colors are red and black. And the other team is called Saprissa, and that's on the other side of the valley. And then like the other half of the country goes with them. But this soccer tradition is so ingrained and so deep in the people in Costa Rica that if you wear the other team's colors in that location, I mean, you're setting yourself up for harassment, for ridicule. There was a sister missionary who was working in that Saprissa area, and I didn't mention Saprissa colors are purple and white. So you've got red and black and purple and white. There was a sister missionary that was working in one of the areas that was deep Saprissa. And it started to rain, and she had an umbrella, which most umbrellas are black. And she had the umbrella out, and a lady came out and threw a glass of water in her face because she had a black umbrella. And it was for the other team. And so soccer tradition and loyalties run very deep in Costa Rica. And I'm sure there are crimes that have been committed over the colors or the loyalties. But more so than just the loyalties of those two teams, soccer is major. So if you know soccer or you know any tricks, don't feel bad if the 6-year-olds can outdo you in the country. So they dance in the streets and they play soccer all the time. So you really get along well if you can kick the ball back to them or do stuff with the little kids, you'll really bond well with them if you can do something in soccer. But most of the time they'll outdo you. They don't really get hurricanes. It's really, really rare. It's pretty close to the equator, and because of that proximity to the equator, hurricanes can't really get there. I mean, hurricanes require Coriolis effect, and they have to be farther from the equator to get to work. But the weather there, the climate, there's basically only two seasons. They call it winter and summer, but it's rainy season and dry season. Rainy season is about from late April to late October, beginning of November, something like that. And during that time, you can count on it raining every single day. About 2 o'clock in the afternoon, I mean, it'll be beautiful and clear in the morning, just gorgeous. And then by the afternoon, clouds will build up, sometimes out of nowhere. And about 2 in the afternoon, it'll start raining. And I was in the mission office for 6 months, and there I had access to a thermometer, like a clock thermometer thing, and we realized every time it rained, the temperature would drop below 70 degrees. So it isn't hot by any stretch of the imagination. The Central Valley, where 2/3 of or 3/4 of the population, in granted missionary work, is located, is at about 4,500 feet elevation, so the same elevation as Provo. So it doesn't get very hot, really, hot ever. I mean, like 85 degrees or something, which for us is fine, but when you're used to it down there, you're like, oh my gosh, it's so hot. But it rains about 2 o'clock every afternoon during the rainy season. During the dry season, it will hardly rain at all. And that's for, about 4 months or something. It does rain every now and then. I mean, it doesn't become, the Sahara, but it doesn't rain anything like it does in the rainy season. And so they call that summer. And that happens during our winter here, even though it's still in the northern hemisphere. It was a little confusing. So Christmas break for them, their school year, Christmas break or the summer. What we have our summer break is somewhere in end of November or beginning of December until sometime in the beginning of the year. So they have Christmas off, and everybody goes to the beach. It's hot. The leaves, whatever leaves you have that have to change, or the trees that die and stuff, it happens during that time. So lots of leaves fall. Sometimes it can be even dusty. It gets really windy in about February and March. It's just constant, really windy and dry and rather warm. And then the rain starts up again. If you're really lucky, there are every year there's something they call the Verano de San Juan, which is the St. John summer, and it happens in July, when supposedly, what I've been told, the winds will shift in Costa Rica. And during that shifting time, you can have just 1 day or even as long as 3 weeks where it'll be like the dry season in the middle of the wet season, and you get beautiful, beautiful clear skies all day long, no rain. Sometimes big storms will pop up over the mountains in the distance, and they just make these incredible sunsets. We had it about 1 week long my first summer there. Well, first July there. And it was just gorgeous, clear, didn't come home with soggy feet, and the most beautiful sunsets over the green mountains you see these big storm clouds up there in pink and gold and stuff. But that's a joy to see if it lasts for longer than a few days there in July. But it's really short, but it's still really wonderful. As a missionary, there weren't too many exciting places to go see where we were at, either from leaving your area or something. I'm trying to think of what we did on our P days, our preparation days. Most of the time, or the best memories I have is when I was in the mission office for 6 months. Our mission president, I was there for my first 3 months was with my first mission president, and the next were with my second mission president. But the first mission president, he had some children with him, so we were allowed to take his car and go anywhere we wanted to on preparation day, as long as his kids were with us. But we had to study first in the mornings, and we had to be back in time to do our shopping and to write our families, and then be working by 6 p.m. So obviously we're not going to, take a 4-hour drive to the coast or anything. But during those times, the most fun we had was actually going to parks. We did so many things with that family. Most of it was in parks. A fun thing that lots of missionaries will do, at least at the start of the mission, and it depends on where you're at, what areas. If you're in a totally city-locked area, it's not going to be possible. But for either district-wide or sometimes zone-wide, we would go waterfall hunting. where we would go. Most areas, and especially all districts and zones in the area, have go up against mountainous areas, and we would sometimes go out as a zone or just a district, and locals would say, "Oh yeah, if you follow this trail up, a couple miles, there's a really cool waterfall." We'd be like, "Awesome, let's go!" And we'd have our hiking boots, and make sure you wear long pants when you're hiking up there, and go. Sometimes we found awesome waterfalls. Sometimes we hiked for a few hours and didn't find anything, and just had fun being together. But a lot of the cool stuff to do as a missionary is outdoors. Let's see, soccer. That's another big thing you do. Play lots and lots of soccer. However, as a tourist, now my family came and picked me up, and we did a lot of touristy things, and I've been back multiple times. There are many things to do. Costa Rica has a lot of active volcanoes. So within the Central Valley, which is where the main international airport is, you have access to, I think, 2 or 3 volcanoes that make some of the mountains in that bowl that the valley is in. One of them, it's called the Irasu volcano, Volcan Irasu. I don't think it's actively like exploded or anything for many years, but it does steam a lot and has a like some acidic lake or something at the bottom. But it's a very big national park, so you drive way high up in the mountains and you get up there, and it can be 15-20 degrees cooler than it is down in the valley. But you drive up there, and if the clouds part, you'll get an excellent view down into the crater of this. And it's a national park, so you've got the little binocular things and the big platforms to stand up and look into. That's an excellent thing to go to. There's another volcano a few hours, 3-4 hours away from the main valley, that's one of the most active in the Western Hemisphere. I've been there a few times, and every time I'm there, you can see it explode. You can hear it rumble, the ground shakes, and you can see it for miles and miles around. It's the classic cone in the midst of like flat. That's absolutely gorgeous. Going along with touristy things, obviously the beaches. You hear about Costa Rican beaches, the western coast, which unfortunately is pretty far from the main airport, the international airport. So you're going to be looking at anywhere from a 3 to 4 hour drive to 6, 7, 8 hour drive to get to some of those really nice beaches. But around some of those, there's actually a park. It's called Manuel Antonio National Park, near the city of Quepos. And it's just this beautiful gem in the middle of Costa Rica, which itself is gorgeous. But it has an extremely large array of different wildlife that are just naturally there. Different kinds of sloths. They've got monkeys everywhere. They have iguanas, lizards, some raccoon-looking things. Not only is that awesome, but the area is beautiful. It's one of the largest tourist attractions there. They happen to have it's a beautiful beach with the heavy jungle coming up over the sand and stuff. But they have this isthmus that goes out to an island, and that's called the Punta Catedral, the Cathedral Point, and it's probably 50 yards wide. This thin strip of, I guess, used to be sand, but it's covered up in jungle. So you're walking in the jungle and you hear the waves and you see the ocean on the right and the left outside of it, and then you come up and it's this. It's not a very large island, but it goes very tall, and it's just full of wildlife and green, and it's a surreal experience, and with the sapphire blue water on both sides, and it's absolutely gorgeous. That's a huge hit for people to go see. Let's see, the surfing I've heard is very good in the northwestern part of Costa Rica. I don't surf, and as a missionary, I never got in the water, so I wouldn't know too much of that. But if you're also looking for more gardener arts things, they have in the main city a beautiful garden. Oh, what was it called? I can't remember. My family went there right before they picked me up, but they really enjoyed it. Large gardens, and they have a very good opera house in there. If you want to see an opera or watch some kind of classical music show, they've got a very good showing for that too. But most of what you'll see in Costa Rica is either reserves, animal reserves, or national parks, the volcanoes, things that you would go to tropical places to see. They don't have Thanksgiving, so don't expect to have a turkey or anything. Christmas Day, nobody will be on the streets. Christmas Eve, everybody stays up until midnight, and midnight's when they open gifts and do stuff. There'll be fireworks just like the 4th of July. And for us in the United States, Christmas Eve is like, you spend time with your family. It's a very quiet time. You go to bed, wake up in the morning all excited. It's very difficult to sleep Christmas Eve night in Costa Rica. I mean, it sounds like a war zone outside, just fireworks everywhere. But that next morning, after you finish calling your family and they open your own gifts and stuff like that, there will be hardly anybody on the streets. The emptiest I've seen streets in Costa Rica was on Christmas Day. Everybody's just sleeping in. They're either sleeping in or they're at the beaches. But the Christmas tradition is very different than what we have in the United States. So it could rustle some feathers a little bit if you're expecting to have a very calm, in our minds, spiritual Christmas time. It might feel like it's being destroyed with all the noise and ruckus and stuff, but it's just their way of celebrating it. Now, they do use a lot of American Christmas decorations. So you'll see Santa Clauses in the midst of little snowy places in the middle of Costa Rica during the dry season. It's a little strange, but that's that. New Year's Day is a lot like Christmas Day. Lots and lots of fireworks. Very loud. No risk of fires, though, because it's just too green. And then their Independence Day is September 15th. They will go ahead and have parades everywhere. I don't remember too much in the way of fireworks, but there were lots of parades. Traffic will be stopped or rerouted to make way for that. There's a very, very strong sense of national pride and patriotism in Costa Rica. They're very proud of their country. So they have lots of stuff that will go ahead and show that during Independence Day. I'm sure there are other holidays and stuff, but I can't quite remember. Halloween is, you might see some Halloween. I think I saw maybe 4 Halloween decorations during my entire 2 years. It's just not something they do. They do celebrate some of the Dia de los Muertos, Day of the Dead. I believe they do in Mexico as well. I don't know too much about that, but I think that's probably their version of Halloween that they have. I think I remember something like that. But the main ones I do remember are Christmas, New Year's Day, and their Independence Day in September. If you're lucky enough to serve in the western part of Costa Rica, which, there's the Central Valley that has, when I was there were only, I think, 12 zones. I think there's much more now. They have an extra stake in the country. They had 4 or 5 when I was there. They have at least one more. But outside of the Central Valley, there's a string of towns heading out to the east, to the Caribbean coast. But there aren't too many people. It's a very wild area out there. Still not many people living out there, not many roads. But out to the west, that's where you get all of the beaches that surfers go to and the most popular volcano there and stuff. So there's many more people out there. So you do have a few zones out there. And if you're lucky enough to go out in that area, many times you will be around monkeys. So a lot of missionaries wanted to go out there and see the monkeys. That was fun. In the country, throughout the whole country, you do have to deal with just monstrous mosquitoes. As I'm Native American, I'm brown, and they have some people said in Costa Rica that mosquitoes don't like brown skin, but they like white. And so I never had that much of an issue with mosquitoes, but I had some companions who would just get eaten alive, and I'd be next to them being, every now and then swat at one or something, and it wasn't much of an issue for me. Let's see, what other wildlife do you have? Oh, spiders. They have really big spiders down there. And most of them aren't, not tarantula type or, wanting to, eat you in your sleep or something. A lot of them are just the garden variety type spiders that just eat bugs. But there's one that's of this variety, but that was still horrific. It was normally about that big with legs. These long, spindly, and it was, I don't know. It was designed to scare people. They're these spindly legs that were mostly black with some dark green, and they had yellow spots and flecks on them, which is just, I don't know. I hate spiders. But they had long, thin bodies between all these legs, and supposedly they don't bite people at all. Like you would see a lot of the Costa Ricans who would pull them off the webs and let them walk around their hands and their arms and, try to offer them to you. And of course, most In the United States, you don't play with spiders much, and it's something they do there. But those spiders were everywhere, especially as you get more into the closer to the mountains. I served in a couple areas that were at the foothills of the mountains. The Central Valley is in a bowl, so there's mountains up all around it. And you get closer to those mountains, there's more trees and more wildlife, and you get more spiders. Sometimes above the roads where the trees came up, you'd have webs stretching across the entire space between the trees. And they're yellow webs, which make it even creepier. Yellow webs, and you'd see just spiders every now and then, or spiders would fall, hopefully not on you when you're walking, but they would fall, and you'd see crushed spiders on the road that had been run over by cars. And when I was in more arid areas outside, close to the mountains, you see lots and lots of spiders. As a missionary, you'll get used to seeing, dogs. Of course, they're domestic, most of them. But people don't have fences, or if they do, a lot of times they just let their dogs run wild, or else the dogs just run everywhere. But we used our umbrella at least as much as we did for rain, we did for keeping dogs away. They normally don't bite. They just want to get close and harass you, but you open the umbrella around them and stuff. I know that's not, tropical fauna or anything, but there were lots of dogs, and that was one thing that I wish I had known before going there, that there would be lots of dogs running. But that's kind of ironic, There's the mailman or a missionary that have dogs running after them. But we did have those. Let's see, flora and fauna. Lots and lots of fruits and vegetables. You'll have lots of fruit trees just growing everywhere. I found out during my mission, unfortunately, that I was allergic to mangoes. And it was after that, serendipitously, that we had lots of mango trees in the apartments I lived in afterwards. Sometimes where it'd be dodging, walking around, I just didn't want to be near them, but mango tree right outside our door. And mangoes, when they fall off all the time, or squirrels, you start eating them and they'll fall off. And most of the time they'll just rot on the ground. There are way too many mangoes and papayas and things for anybody to really care about. So yeah, lots and lots of fruit. Mango, papaya, those are extremely common. Cantaloupe, very common. And then they have a few more things. Tamarindo, I think it's called tamarind in English. It's kind of a seed. I think it grows on like palm trees or something, but they make juices out of that. They have certain little fruit called cas in Costa Rica that they make fruits out of, that, or drinks out of, that I absolutely love. So kind of the tropicalness that you'd expect going down there, in the sense that extremely big leaves, lots and lots of green. I don't think there's much in the way of poison ivy or stuff like that, but you could easily have an allergic reaction to something out there. So you don't want to go running through the jungle willy-nilly. But you do get exposed to lots and lots of greenery, lots of flowers, lots of gigantic bugs that you never thought you would see that big. Dragonflies, beetles, and stuff, but nothing to be afraid of. So it was, I loved it. And I've been back a couple times with my wife, and we've had fun with those spiders and stuff, but it was really wonderful. Music, what you'll hear a lot of times walking through the streets, people, it's kind of funny, they a lot of places you'll work will be with government housing. A lot of places where missionaries work, let me say, is in government housing. So they're small houses, they're concrete walls, and but a lot of times amidst the concrete walls and concrete floors or dirt floors, they will have some really nice TVs and some very nice sound systems. And so you'll definitely hear lots and lots of music while you're walking there. And most of the music is actually that ranchera type music that you hear with the accordion and the trumpets, kind of mariachi-esque. You'll hear a lot of that. So that's very popular. Dancing is huge in Costa Rica. So you'll see, there were many times when I'd be walking with my companion, or even when I've been back visiting people, not as a missionary, you will still see people, there'll be a group of kids outside with the music playing and then just dancing in the streets, salsa or merengue or something like, I don't know what those dances are, but everybody there does. They learn it from a very young age, and dancing is a huge part. So when missionaries are out there, when you have members who don't know the missionaries that well, or were converts or something, a lot of times they don't understand missionaries don't dance. And and you'd be at a ward function, I don't know, Relief Society Christmas dinner or something like that, where they've invited the missionaries, and of course free food. But then they'll start music, and they'll be like, "Elder, come dance," and you'd be like, "I can't dance. You don't understand. We don't dance." And sometimes they might take a little affront to it. I mean, dancing is what they do. So if it was strange to me, but being at some of those functions where music would happen and dancing would ensue, if there weren't enough men, the women would just dance together, and it didn't matter who was there, they danced with them. They just loved dancing. That was a big thing that was different for me, but I thought was absolutely, I thought it was awesome, them dancing together. Everybody always dancing. Kind of the iconic dish of Costa Rica is what is called gallo pinto. Gallo is how you say rooster. Pinto is painted. Gallo pinto is painted rooster. Don't know why, but it's a mix of primarily rice and black beans, and they go ahead and have sautéed onions and red bell pepper, onions, red bell pepper, garlic, and then they have a special sauce that they have in the country called salsa lisano sauce. Lisano's a name from somebody, but it's a brown sauce, almost like a gravy consistency, but it's got a much different flavor than gravy. It's a combination of lots of different spices and stuff, but everybody eats with this Lisano sauce in the country. And gallo pinto is made with the vegetables and rice that I mentioned earlier, with the Lisano sauce poured in, so it gives it a very unique taste. But that's the standard breakfast. I guess like we have breakfast cereal in the United States, Corn Pops or Lucky Charms or something. There they have gallo pinto. So they'll have the gallo pinto for normal breakfast. We'll include the gallo pinto. You'll have normally like a baguette or a French bread toasted with their margarine on top of it. Normally an egg or two fried or scrambled, most of the time fried. And then completing this typical breakfast would be slices of plantain. And plantain is it's like a big banana. It has a slightly different flavor, and what they do is they fry it. They'll put it in oil, fry it, and it sounds pretty gross, but it has a much thicker, stronger consistency than a normal banana. So when you fry it, it keeps its shape, and actually it will pull out the sugars and kind of caramelize. And it actually, I love it. I absolutely love it. And most missionaries did. Some of them couldn't get past the banana part, but that is normally what completes the typical breakfast of Costa Rica: is the gallo pinto, the bread, the egg, and the plátano frito, fried plantain. I'm just going to try to do the typical dinner, or I guess common traditional dinner, is called a casado, which means married or couple or something. But it normally has beans and rice, and then some kind of meat, normally pork or chicken, stewed or something like that, with the plátano frito, the fried plantain, and some kind of salad. And their salads aren't what we see here in the United States. When I first heard salad there, I was thinking, romaine or spinach or something. Their salads mainly consist of cabbage, sometimes not much of that, lots of tomatoes, onions, salt, lime, some vinegar. That takes a little bit of getting used to, but once you do it, you absolutely love it. So that's kind of the main thing. It's lots and lots of rice and beans. Rice is served at every single meal. It's a staple. They live on beans at almost every single meal as well. You'll go to people's houses, and a lot of times they'll feed you, whether you ask them to or not. Be it little cookies with a drink. Many times they'll give you a full meal. They'll just cook it right along with everybody else, and they'll give it to them. And it always consists of rice and beans and fried plantain and a meat of sorts, like that typical dinner. It's because fruits are so ubiquitous everywhere. They have lots and lots of drinks. Imagine a mix between a smoothie and Kool-Aid. So it's got little specks in it and stuff when they make these smoothies out of fruits. They call them frescos. Fresco means fresh in Spanish, but they call them frescos, where they'll just get the fruit and they'll just get like for instance, one I'm thinking of is called cas. Think of a sort of fruit about that big. It's green on the outside, but it's got a very strong flavor, but it has the seeds and everything in there. They'll just get that whole thing, maybe chop it in half and dump it in a blender. 3 or 4 of them, put in a lot of water, dump in some sugar, and then just blend it for like a minute. So it pulverizes almost everything. tastes really good. Almost all frescos are just absolutely delicious. And you begin to really get acquainted with certain kinds. And people ask, do you want gas, tamarindo, melon? And you'd be like, oh, I really love gas. I want, and that's almost all the time. In addition to meals, you'll get them in meals. When you go by and stop a lot of times, or stop by to see someone, a lot of times they won't have anything to give you except a fresco. They'll give you a fresco to drink. If they don't have a fresco, they'll have a refresco, which is, I guess that means refreshing or something, but most of the time that's just the powdered lemonade, Kool-Aid. They have a brand there called Suco that they use all the time. And food-wise, that's what you get a lot. They don't have much in the way of the, I guess, typical desserts that we're used to. They have strange, for me they were strange desserts. I can't remember much of them right now. But I remember gooiness and strange flavors that weren't bad by any stretch of the imagination, but they were just a little odd. They don't have much ice cream. You can get ice cream from them, but it's more of a frozen yogurt kind of thing. They don't have that really hard, premium ice cream that we're used to here, or especially here in Utah. But I still have a very sweet spot for Costa Rican cuisine. I make gallo pinto a lot at home, and it's one of my wife's favorite foods because it's very fresh, very flavorful. But you'll absolutely love the food in Costa Rica. It's not anything, you won't find a Costa Rican restaurant anywhere. It's not that kind of big kind of food. It's just really comforting, homey stuff, and very few things that you won't like unless you don't like fruit. Costa Rica has a very unique accent compared to the rest of Central America, or the rest of the Hispanic-speaking world. It's a very, not very slow Spanish, but it's not fast by any means, like Mexican or Spain or Chilean Spanish. But the things that really set it apart, it's called their principal R's, or their double R's. Like they don't say correr. Actually, two things that are funny with that word. But their double R's and principal R's, which are normally rolled, they actually do a R. And it's almost like a Z or a J, almost like a J, but the tongue, when it starts to roll, it never quite starts the rolling. So instead of going a R, it goes R. And that's how they do with their double R's. Like if they say, for instance, to run, correr, they would say correr. Correr, and that R. And a lot of times they'll go and another thing that most missionaries, especially those who spoke Spanish before, can't stand, the really, I guess you could call them, I don't want to use the word redneck, but Costa Ricans that live outside of the city and are much more like on a farm or a ranch or something, that much more outback kind of accent. Their ending R's, E-R-A-R-I-R, whatever, becomes a sh. And a lot of the country, it's one of those endearments, but they also make fun of themselves all the time. So a lot of times they'll call their wives, like we say in the United States, oh honey. They'll call them, oh my love, mi amor, but they say mi amor. And people will make fun of it and say, oh mi amor. But it through a lot of the people you'll meet, especially humble people from out, we call it out in the campo, out in like the I don't know if that means field, but like, the boonies that we have out here in the States, they'll talk like that. They'll say, if they have to eat is comer, and they'll say, ya es tiempo de comer, and they'll have that sh in there. Or like the word I used earlier, to run, correr, they say correr. And there's that. Those are probably things that stands out super strong with the Costa Rican accent. They do have their own lilting, the way that they speak. Their double L's and their Y's are also je. So they say la capilla, to go to the chapel. We say tortillas here because we're so close to Mexico, and they say tortilla. They have that je sound in there that actually I grew to love. So when I speak Spanish with my brother served in Chile, and we speak Spanish together, it just drives him up the wall. He doesn't mind the je's because he says those too, but when I start having the je, and especially that sh, oh, he can't stand it. But it's so dear to my heart, being, having served my mission there and being there so many times and having lots of friends there who speak in that way. it's a unique accent, and you will stand out when you speak Spanish afterwards. When I was in my secondary, my mission, it wasn't easy. I was sent to the city called Puerto Limon, and it's very, very, very warm there. It's on the Caribbean coast, and it's what you would expect on the Caribbean coast, like 90, 95 degrees and about that same humidity, 90, 95% humidity. Very, very humid, very warm. And I was sent there as the companion to the newly called branch president. So my companion was a branch president. I was a one and only counselor, and it was a struggling branch, and we had missionary work on the side. It was only my second area, 3 months into Costa Rica, and I could barely speak the language, let alone understand people. And it was a very, very difficult time for me. And I remember having lots of personal fasts and lots of prayers and lots of scripture reading and praying that it would somehow get easier. And it wasn't. It seemed to be getting harder and harder and harder. And I remember one morning that I felt like it was breaking point. I was sitting at my little desk in our rundown apartment. It was really hot. I remember I was sweating, I was sticky, I was tired, exhausted really, and I'd just gotten up. I was frustrated, I was depressed, I was overwhelmed by everything we had to do, and I remember at that moment feeling something inside me just break, and I decided then I can't do this. This is too much for me. And I remember standing up. My plan was to go to the phone and call the mission president and say, President, I can't do this anymore. This is above me, above my head. And as I stood up, a scripture popped in my head. A scripture actually that I had to look through the topical guide and the index to find, because I wasn't that familiar with it. But it popped in my head just clear as if I was reading it. It was from Doctrine and Covenants 122. The Lord responds to Joseph Smith when he was asking the Lord where he was and why he wasn't helping him. And the response that popped in my head was the latter end of verse 7, going into verse 8. It said, and even if the jaws of hell shall gape wide open after thee, know thou, my son, that these things shall be for thy experience and be for thy good. The Son of Man hath descended below them all. Art thou greater than he? And the impact that scripture had on me at that moment, it was like a brick hitting me in the head. And I remember from standing up, I sat down and I just started crying. And it was, I had the most overwhelming feeling of love and support, probably that I've ever had in my life. That the Lord understood what I was doing and where I was going, and the struggles and the pain and the discomfort that I had, and let alone the fact that I had no idea what the people were telling me. But that He understood all of that. Not only understood it, but that the Savior had gone through that and even more. And that all of this, despite my complaints, was going to be for my good and teach me. And that really I had no leg to stand on, because the Savior had gone through so much worse than I had. From that point, my entire mission changed. I really stopped complaining about things, but the biggest thing I learned was that I learned how to rely on the Lord. Until that moment, I had been trying to do everything on my own. I was pretty bright in school, high school and college, and I was used to being able to conquer things with my own brain. But on a mission, I was nothing compared to what the Lord needed me to do. And until I learned how to give up my own self and trust completely in the Lord, it wasn't going to work for me. And once I made that decision, it changed not only the rest of my mission, relying on the Lord and seeing miracles happen all around me, but for the rest of my life since then, relying on the Lord and not my own judgment and my own intelligence to see me through, to get me where the Lord wanted me to be. And since then, I've seen miracles and wonderful things happen in the mission, in my life since then, knowing that if I rely on the Lord and give up everything to Him, that things will work out, be it in the mission, in my personal life, with my family, that it will work out in the end. I was a senior companion, and the area I was in was called Ipiz, Costa Rica. It was up in the mountains, and my companion and I had to walk a little bit to get in there. We lived in a neighboring area with some other elders, and the main drag, we would walk down, we would pass everything. We would pass the chapel on the left side after we got in and walked down the mountain through it, and houses on the right and left, all over the place. Now, we had on the schedule, and being a good senior companion that I was, we had, an A and a B and a C schedule. So if A didn't work out, we went to B. If B didn't work out, we went to C. And we're walking down this drag, and it was probably in the mid-morning, 11 o'clock-ish, noonish, somewhere around there. And I remember we passed a man and a woman, and the man was carrying a little girl. And we passed them on the road. We actually had to walk past them on the right, but we were late for this really, really promising appointment. Not quite late. We were just going to be there right on time. So we're walking, and the thought popped in my head, talk to these people. And I was like, oh, we've got this really important appointment set up right now. We have to go see, we'll probably see them again. This isn't a big area. Most people stay right here. So we went down to this appointment, and they weren't there. So I was like, okay, plan B. It's up here. We got to go. So we went back up and passed the people again. Past them going up the hill. They were walking rather slowly. Got to this next, and that thought popped in my head again. And once again, I was like, well, we've got this appointment that we have to go to. Went to the appointment. They weren't there either. So I was like, okay, plan C. It's back down the hill. So we started walking down the hill, and this time we were on the other side of the street. And that family was walking up, and we were walking down. And that thought came into my head again. But it was stronger this time. And finally I realized, oh, hey, this might be a prompting. And I remember I just stopped in my tracks, and my companion kept walking. And it was this kind of struggle I had. I'm really big. If I set an appointment, I'm going to be there. I hate letting people down. But the other side was the Lord really wants me to talk to these people. And so I had stopped in my tracks. My companion turned around about 10 feet ahead and said, are you okay? And I said, we have to talk to those people. And I turned around and started walking towards them. And this was during the wind. It was probably February, March. It was really windy. As I mentioned, there's a windy season. And the wind at that point caught, I think the baby girl was holding her mom's scrunchie or something. And it caught it. It caught the wind, and it blew up. And I'm not lying or trying to be cheesy or anything like that, but literally it landed at my feet as I'm walking through the road to get these people. And so I thought, oh, well, I guess this is what's supposed to happen, and picked it up and walked over to them, handed them their scrunchie. I was like, I think you lost this. And by the way, my name is Elder Gardner. I'm a missionary for the Church of Jesus Christ. And so we started talking, and they were extremely receptive. They were just all smiles, invited us over for the next day, and we went and we visited them for a long time afterwards. They weren't baptized at that time. They were living with their parents or her parents or his parents, one of them, and they were very against the church, very staunch Catholics. But we did get a chance to plant a seed, and they were very receptive to it. They really liked the Book of Mormon and what they were reading, and sometimes it really scares me to think what would have happened if I had not listened to the prompting that I was receiving from the Spirit walking down. I passed them twice before, and that third time when it hit me super strong to speak to them, it kind of scares me to think what I would have to answer to if I hadn't stopped and talked to them. But I'm glad I did. I'm glad I made that relationship, and they were excellent, wonderful, wonderful people. I was in the mission office for 6 months in the middle of my mission, an office elder, and the way the mission was organized and set up in the office, I was companions with one of the assistants. We had 3 assistants and 3 office elders. So a companionship of office elders, companionship of the assistants to the president, and then one hybrid companionship, and that was me with one of the assistants. And we were expected, I think because I was with the assistant, we were expected to do just as much work as the other missionaries in the mission, even though we had to be in the office until 4 p.m. every day. So it's kind of, no pressure, but, have your numbers up and teach discussions and everything. So we worked very hard. And during the 6 months I was there, Um, it was near the end of the 6 months, and we hadn't seen any baptisms yet, which was a little discouraging. And we happened to run into or receive a referral from a really good member family in a neighboring area. Some missionaries. They had the mother of this family was a Relief Society president, and she was a recent convert of like a couple years, but she had a sister that lived in our area. So we decided to go over there and meet her, and we figured out pretty quick that it would be really difficult to get anything done in a quick time frame. The woman we went to see, she had a husband, but they weren't married, which is extremely common in Costa Rica. Not many people get married. They just decide to live together and they have children, mom, dad, everything, but they're not officially married. So she wasn't married, and she had a couple daughters. And so, but they really wanted to learn. They really liked what they had seen of the church so far with the mother's sister, who was the Relief Society president in that neighboring ward. So we started teaching them. They were probably some of the most receptive, the term we use, golden investigators that I'd ever had. But she wasn't married and stuff. But they kept wanting to hear, and they were doing everything we were asking. They were reading, they were praying, they were building testimonies very quickly. And it came to the point where, we told her about, you have to get married, have to get all this cleaned up, and she understood. Her spouse was kind of against marriage, though later that changed afterwards. But during this time, she couldn't get married, and so she couldn't be baptized, which she wanted to do, but she understood why. Now, one of her daughters, the younger one, she was 13 years old at the time, 13 or 14, very bright, very smart for her age, but she really liked everything as well, and she wanted to be baptized. And it's not very common to baptize a 13-year-old girl, or none of her family are members. You don't want to baptize somebody if they're just going to fall away, if they don't have that support that's needed. But her mother was very, very supportive, and she had extremely supportive aunt and cousins who were all active in the church. So being in the office as I was, the mission president said, go ahead and do it. We have a good relationship with her extended family that can support her. And so that was my one and only baptism in that area, was a 13-year-old girl. And it was wonderful, Spirit was there and everything. But you can't help but feel as a missionary, is this going to work? Am I just baptizing her? It wasn't just to get a number, obviously. She truly did want to. But am I just setting them up for failure? Is this going to be a flash in the pan? What's going to happen? And most missionaries have doubts like that. You're just hoping everything, that the testimony stays and stuff. I kept in contact with her mother afterwards. I think it was on Facebook or something. And she ended up getting married and getting baptized, becoming Relief Society president, and then becoming Stake Relief Society president. And actually, just a few months ago, 2 months ago, we were chatting online, and it had come up, and I guess she had forgotten or I had missed an email or something, I don't know. But that girl that I had baptized at 13 years old, her name was Jimena. She is now serving a mission in Panama. And she sent me some pictures of her as a missionary, and I went ahead and put them together of the day she was baptized, both of us in white, and the picture with her as a missionary with her companion in Panama with the family that they had just baptized. And I have a son now, so I know what it's like to be a father, but the joy that came from knowing that she had stayed in the gospel and had not only enjoyed living it, but loved it so much she wanted to share it with other people, and was doing so, that the 13-year-old girl that I had doubts about was now spreading the gospel and bringing others to Christ, was sitting there in my office that day that I saw alone with this little picture. Is probably one of the most fantastic moments I've had of seeing that little seed grow to the immense testimony that it is now in her. Was words almost can't describe it. So there are many places in Costa Rica that are not as safe. I'm trying to nice way to put it. Not as safe as you would hope. most like my family came and picked me up when I was a missionary there. We have friends that are Costa Rican, and so we had places to stay and stuff. But there were some places that I would not take my family. Some areas as a missionary, you really never have to worry about safety. First off, there's the Lord is protecting you. I mean, you're not bulletproof or anything, but the Lord's protecting you. Second off, most of the Costa Rican people understand who you are and why you're there. They might not believe you, but they understand you're there paying your own way. You're there volunteering, and you're there. And even though they might not believe you, they still believe you're there sent by God. A lot of people. So most of the time, the Costa Rican people will stick up for you. Not to say that you won't have any mishaps. I myself, I did have a ring stolen from me, a ring and a watch. A guy came with a knife, and actually, not to scare anybody who's watching this, it was probably one of the calmest robberies that's ever taken place on the planet. I wasn't scared in the least. I was just like, well, okay, well, here, have my watch, and here, have my ring. Oh, on this side, and that was about it. The anything that has happened to people or to missionaries was the lightest, most calm, non-violent ways that something could possibly be. I never heard anything that was violent at all. I mean, there are some missionaries, obviously, when you're working in slums and stuff like that, there are some missionaries that were robbed of money or something like that, but never was any violence really taken. And from what I've heard from a lot of the Costa Ricans is that despite the want of to commit the crime that criminals are doing, there is a deep fear of God. They're a religious country. Catholicism is the Costa Rican religion, state mandated religion. They teach it in schools and everything. So even though they might not, in essence, believe, they still have a fear of God. So there's if anything happens to missionaries, it's very, very tiptoeing around it. People do believe that there's godly vengeance and stuff that happens. So most people stay clear, and most people defend them if anything were to happen, which is very, very, very rare. That happened to me, and I think I knew of one other missionary that had anything happen to him the 2 years I was there, which encompasses the years before me that people were there. So, so that being said, safety. If you're not a missionary, just make sure where you're going is, you talk to people either on buses or on taxis or touristy people, and just make sure if I'm going to this place, is it a little dangerous? As with any place in Central America, it's easy to fall into the wrong place if you don't know where you're going. If you know where you're going, then I wouldn't worry about it at all. I've been back multiple times with either family or my wife, and we've had wonderful, wonderful experiences. We've known where to go, we've known where to avoid, and so haven't had any issues. For those of you who have a mission call to Costa Rica, a few things that I would like to tell you before you head on out there. First off, congratulations. Costa Rica is a beautiful, beautiful place, and they have wonderful, wonderful people in the country there. A few things that I wish I had known before I went out there. It is very wet, and when I say very wet, I mean during the wet season, I didn't come home at night without my legs from the knees down soaking wet. So be prepared for that. It isn't a cold rain or anything, so don't worry, you won't get cold. But it is wet. The people there are extremely nice. They are extremely welcoming for the most part. Catholicism does run deep, so there are most people are raised Catholic, though they may not know a lot of the tenets of their faith. They still are Catholic, which doesn't make them any worse people at all. They are wonderful, wonderful people. But just keep that in mind. There's a very strong Christian faith in the country. The people there are very, very receptive to hearing. Most of the time, Americans, white skin, they want people in there to talk to them.